Hello and welcome to this course on design patterns in Java. My name is Dimitri and I'm here to take you on this journey to take your Java skills to a whole new level. So what are design patterns all about? Well, put simply, design patterns are common architectural approaches that have been observed in software engineering practices, and these common approaches are expressed in the form of so-called design patterns. Now, a pattern is nothing more than a description of the approach, how it is expressed in a programming language, and what it's actually used for. The notion of design patterns was popularized in 1994 by the Immortal Gang of Four book, and this book effectively spun off an entire industry devoted to expressing design patterns in various settings. The notion of design patterns has been translated to just about every object-oriented programming language that's out there, so you'll find books on design patterns in C#, Java, Ruby, and lots of other languages, including languages which aren't properly object-oriented, such as JavaScript, for example. Now, the curious thing about design patterns, and ultimately the reason why this course you're watching right now exists, is that because we're still living in an object-oriented paradigm, design patterns have become universally relevant. So in other words, the patterns didn't become outdated and obsolete, and they are unlikely to go out of fashion anytime soon. Furthermore, some programming languages actually made design patterns part of the language, making the pattern a lot easier to use. Many pattern implementations are also available as libraries that you can download and use in your own applications. And finally, if you've been writing code long enough, you're probably already using some design patterns in your own code, even if you're not explicitly aware of them. So the structure of this course is fairly canonical. We're going to begin by discussing the solid design principles, and then we'll go through the so-called gamma categorization of design patterns. We'll go through the creational, structural, and behavioral design patterns. So the patterns that we're going to cover are also fairly standard in the creational block. We're going to cover all the standard patterns, but I've made a slight change by grouping the abstract factory and factory method into a single course section entitled factories. I think it's a more correct representation of the overall idea of a factory. When it comes to structural design patterns, we're going to follow the standard list. And when it comes to behavioral design patterns, we're also going to follow the standard Gang of Four list, the only change here being the addition of the null object design pattern. Alright, so let's talk about the organization of the course. The course is 100% practical and hands-on, which means you're going to see me program right inside the IDE, and I'm going to basically present a number of different demonstrations of the design patterns, and all of them are going to be single Java files, which you can download and you can open them in IDE or Eclipse or just run them from the command line. Every single design pattern has end-of-section coding exercises, and most of these exercises are of the implement this pattern variety, which means I'll give you a scenario and I want you to implement the pattern that you've just learned about to solidify your knowledge of how the pattern is actually implemented. Now, in terms of the demos, I'm going to be using the latest version of Java, obviously. I'm also going to be doing some code generation behind the scenes, generating some boilerplate code so as not to waste too much of your time. Now, I'm going to go with the approach where I have many non-public classes per file. This is not the canonical Java approach. In Java, typically you have one class per file. However, I'm going to do this specifically so that we don't waste too much time jumping from one file to another. I'm also going to have a permissive approach to visibility, so sometimes I'm going to leave things public that otherwise wouldn't have been, and this is once again to avoid wasting your time with the extensive generation of getters and setters and whatnot. And finally, I'm going to make liberal use of external packages. So whatever library I need, I'm going to download it and use it and show you how to use it in the context of a particular pattern. Now, in terms of the prerequisites for this course, you have to have a good understanding of object-oriented programming. You have to have a good understanding of Java, obviously. And I'm also going to mention some tangential topics, such as, for example, sequence processing and things like reactive extensions. I'm going to mention concurrency and the idea of thread safety, and I'll make use of dependency injection in certain cases just to illustrate how particular design patterns work with the notion of dependency injection. Finally, let me say a few words about myself. My name is Dimitri. Here is a rather official looking picture of me. I work in an area called quant finance, which is a combination of math, finance, and computing, including some sophisticated applications of high performance computing. I am a book author, a conference speaker, a blogger, a user group leader, and very involved in the developer community. I've authored multiple courses on platforms such as Pluralsight, Udemy, and others. So if you're ready to learn about the Java design patterns, then jump into the course and I shall see you on the other side.